All right, now we're rolling.
Okay, now we're back. We had a little technical difficulties that
yes. This never happens.
none of you saw or are privy to, but we are back again for another episode of Cinema Discovery Project, and we are steeped deep into October. We are midway through October, and yeah, it's been a quick month, and I've been just consuming massive amounts of horror movies as I do every October.
Yeah, and I have been consuming massive amounts of wedding cake because I've been to 3 weddings in this past month, and
oh my goodness.
I'm done. I'm done with it. I'm done. No, but it's been some good times. I had my own wedding, and then a friend of my wife. We went to their wedding. It was really nice, and then my brother got married. So, and it was in a big damn old factory. It was mega. It's a mega wedding. So that was fun.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. Congratulations on all of those things for all of those people, including yourself. Yeah, that's just too much socializing for my brain.
I'll be honest with you. By the time we got about to 8:00 at night, a wedding takes all day, and I was in the wedding, so I was really involved from like 9 a.m. until all the way at 10:00 at night. So by the end of the day, you're kind of like I got to about 8:00. I was like, I'm kind of tired, but I wanted to stay for my brother. It was his night, so we stayed the whole time.
Yeah, I went to one wedding last year. My cousin got married, and yeah, it was like an all-day thing. Not all day, but for me it was all day. And it was out there in the woods. There was terrible Wi-Fi and just I'm not a big party man myself. Not a big dancer. Not a big go-getter. Obviously, my main thing is watching movies and then talking about it with other people. That's my idea of a good time.
It is a good time. I tried to do that with some random person while we were staying at the hotel, and I think everybody else was getting bored, and me and this person were just having great conversation. I'm like, guys, you guys have lost the art of conversation? Jeez, get off your phones, but yeah.
I know, seriously. It's sometimes it's difficult to socialize with people after a while if you haven't done it for a while. I find that to be my issue. Also, it's tough for me not to just, go directly to relating everything to movies.
Yeah.
I'm the type of person who walks around quoting movies in normal conversations.
Oh, yeah, I've learned most of my life lessons from watching movies and TV.
Oh, who hasn't? I mean, those are the best life lessons. I mean, those are the only life lessons that I think anyone has ever...
It's much easier to watch somebody else do something stupid on a movie
than yourself.
And that's how I learned that, drinking and driving sucks. You shouldn't do that.
Oh, yeah. No,
because you could kill somebody else, or run into like a horror movie character, like in how did I know? How do I know what you did last summer? Yeah, it could anything could happen. So a hook man could come after you. So that kept me from drinking and driving.
I don't life. What also keeps me. Also another life lesson is don't listen to charismatic preachers who come out of nowhere. And that leads us directly into what we're going to be talking about on this episode.
What a coincidence.
And this is my pick of the podcast, pick of the week, pick of the episode. And this is The Night of the Hunter, directed by Charles Lawton and starring Robert Mitchum, a mutual favorite of Stephen and
yes.
I, actor. It also stars
Shelley Winters.
Shelley Winters, Lillian Gish, James Gleason. Peter Graves is in the movie for one scene, and people will probably know Peter Graves most notoriously from Mission Impossible and Airplane.
Yeah.
And he was also in Stalag 17. But, I was like, is that Peter Graves? When I was rewatching the movie, I'm like, yes, it is Peter Graves. But this is, not always, but over the last several years, this has consistently been one of my personal favorite movies. And the reason being is just how unlike any of the films that that were like it at the time, and just how like consistently contemporary it still remains in many of its facets. And it's traditionally considered a film noir, not typically a a horror film specifically, but to me it's a horror film.
I think if you had added maybe some different music to it, it would come over a lot scarier.
Right.
I would say a lot of there are a lot of this movie that doesn't have music at all, but I think if you reared up some like scarier music, it would seem more like a horror movie because the scenario is terrifying. I mean, it's about a man that basically, proclaims to be a preacher, a man of God, but uses that as a facade to get close to single women, widows, and kills them, and
runs off.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that gravitated me towards it initially when I saw it years ago. And what is also I find so unique about The Night of the Hunter is you don't really hear about this movie until you get into certain like cinephile film circles, I think. Like, it just feels like a hidden treasure to me.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that's why I always recommend it, because I don't think people know about this movie. And I think they should. One, because it stars Robert Mitchum, who I think is a fantastic actor. Like I said, one of my favorites, but also directed by Charles Laughton, who I think is one of the best actors of all time. And this is the only film he ever directed. And a lot of people believe it to be because when this movie came out, it was not well received. It's one of those movies where by modern consensus, it's considered a classic or an all-time great or whatever you want to call it. But in the time it came out, got critically panned. The same thing with Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, which is now considered one of the best movies of all time. Got critically panned when it came out. And what is interesting is people think that he didn't want to direct other films because of its negative response. But I was reading up on it, and basically it was because he preferred to direct the theater versus movies. He felt it was easier to direct theater and easier to work within the theater structure than it was to work within the movie structure, which are like two completely different fields in terms of what you can do and manipulate and change and all that kind of stuff. But Night of the Hunter for me was one of the earlier Criterion editions that I ever bought when I started collecting Criterions quite coincidentally religiously. And yeah. And Steven, how many times have you seen this movie?
I would say it's probably my third time seeing it. So I know it pretty well. I mean, it's not a very complicated story. It's a pretty
it's a short film.
Yeah, it's pretty short. It's pretty straightforward. But it's I think the thing that stands out mostly about it is the photography. I think it's a beautifully photographed movie. A lot of great still shots. Great contrast.
I think that's why it's part of film noir is because of its aesthetic.
Yeah.
And the cinematographer was Stanley Cortez, who's the guy who shot the movie. And this movie is also based off of a book, I believe, called The Night of the Hunter, a novel. The author was Davis Grubb, and it was adapted by Charles Laughton and James Agee. I think that's, or Agee? I don't know. I don't know how you pronounce it. Either way, yeah, so without further ado, for those of you who haven't been keeping up with all of these episodes, we will be spoiling the heck out of this movie. So be forewarned for that. And like we said, it's not that long of a movie, clocks in at about an hour and 32 minutes or so. And it's a pretty straightforward story, but I feel like it's rich in its themes, and we'll dive into that when we get into it. Yeah. So it starts off as most, horror movies or film noir start off with a murder. And I believe it starts off, and there's like this dolly shot of this close up of just these kids discovering this dead body of this, of a woman.
Well, they're playing hide and seek.
Yeah, and that's how they discover the body. And there's a great dolly shot close up of the woman's you don't see her whole corpse, but you just see her like her legs, and he's in one of those basement entrances, I believe, from the outside going in, like those stairwells that go down, and yeah, they're just like, see a dead body. So right away, I find this film fascinating in the sense that it's already breaking the idea of children losing like a sense of grace or a sense of innocence, of discovering death right away. Yeah. Like, it establishes that right away. I think that's just a defining theme in the movie.
Yeah, and for a movie that came out in 1955, this was a pretty, like, heavy subject to be, like, going pretty straightforward with it. I mean, they're not really pulling punches. I mean, kids discover dead body, and you just kind of settle with it, yeah.
Yeah, by a modern perspective, it doesn't seem as, unusual. You know what I mean? Because, I mean, we hear about murders and deaths in the news every day. Yeah. There are people, witnessing and going through, like, such terrible things. But this is, like, a 1950s, like, mentality. This is, like, post-war, the post-war mentality. You're dealing with what I like to call the 1950s, like, Leave It to Beaver era of America.
We're supposed
suburbs to be, and white America and all that. Yeah,
we're supposed to be like, not talking about all the bad things that actually happen. You're supposed to be forgetting about that stuff.
I know. Yeah, forget about, like the rampant racism and misogyny that exists in society, but you too can live in this wonderful suburb community with white picket fences and I think we've 2 kids and a dog.
Yeah, we've talked about nonsense. I can't remember which movie we were talking about, but we'd mentioned in another movie where this kind of compares to something like Nicholas Ray's Bigger Than Life, where it's very much...
Which came out, like, I think came out in, like, 1956, 1957, in that era. Let me look it up. But, and I put The Night of the Hunter in that same category of movies that came out in the 1950s, just, like, saying that, the world isn't so nice. Yeah. The world isn't so good. And I think that's what this movie's commenting on. But what is interesting is that the movie is set in the 1930s. So it's not set in, it's not set in the 1950s. It's still saying, like,
it's like the Depression era.
It's like the Depression era, but it's saying, like, this type of evil, this type of stuff has always been happening. Just because we live in this post-war utopia, if you will. I put utopia in air quotes. You can't see it, of course, but doesn't mean that this stuff doesn't exist. Yeah. And Bigger Than Life came out in 1956. Because I wanted to see if Rebel Without a Cause, another film of the same ilk, if you will, I think came out in 1955. So there was also Nicholas Ray. But like I said, right away, the world is, kind of shattered for not only this group of children at the beginning of this movie, but I think for us as audience members, you're already establishing that this movie is dealing with murder and death and just evil and stuff like that. And what we get after that is, I believe we get our introduction to Robert Mitchum's character, who his name is Harry Powell. And he's driving along in a car. I think we get almost like a wide, like establishing helicopter shot of him driving across the countryside, and he's in the area of the, like, Ohio River Valley type place. He's just kind of, like, traversing that area. And what we learned right away, yet again, this movie is straightforward. This guy may not be all there when it comes to his brains.
He spends a lot of time...
his thought process.
Yeah, he spends a lot of time talking to himself, talking to God. And you can take that as you will, but we know that this guy's a murderer, so he uses the talking to God as his kind of mechanism for deciding things, kind of like Two-Face flipping a coin.
Also, kind of like his rationale.
Yeah.
Is that, like, God's I know he's like Lord, you keep guiding them. It's like fate. You keep guiding them towards me, and I keep,
It's you can say, like, at first, when you first watch this movie, you have to decide whether you think that he's kind of using it as like a shield to keep people from thinking, or it's just part of his mechanism as a psychopath, because there are types of psychopaths that are religious, and then they look at certain types of people as not part of this world. They direct, like, and with this character, he very much doesn't like promiscuous women. So he, as a religious thing, he wants to get rid of the promiscuous women.
To me specifically, I don't think it's so much a rationale as the fact I think he's psychotic.
Yeah.
I mean, he is.
So he's not. You don't think he's hiding behind the religion. You just think he's a religious nut.
Yes.
Okay.
That was how I read it when I first saw it. That's kind of how I read it now.
I don't know. It's hard for me to decide, because I think
he's definitely a fraud, though. Like, he's a fraud who knows he's a fraud, but he also believes his own bullshit.
I guess, yeah. I mean, it's hard to tell, because part of me wants to think that he's completely using it as a shield, and he knows he doesn't actually believe anything he says. But then his motivations seem to be in link with somebody that's obsessed with religious, traditionalism.
Right.
So,
like, staunch traditionalism, which is something, I mean, maybe projecting myself on here, but which is something I loathe entirely, because I think it's just, and you see, and I think specifically how we get into it is you see why it's so bad, literally, in the movie, because it leads to these people committing acts under the precedence in their own mind that they're doing the right thing. Yeah. You know what I mean? We see that in the people who are gullibly duped by him, and how they turn later on in the movie. But getting back into it, before we go too far down and we go down too many avenues, what we also then see is while he's driving away, is that he's talking to God. I think he's committed 12 or 13
he says he doesn't really
point.
know. He's lost count, basically.
You think he's lost count. And what we come to know is that he has a switchblade knife that I think he does all of his murders with. Or at least that's his favorite weapon of choice when it comes to committing these murders. And I initially thought that he was doing it for money, but I wasn't sure if that was only in this instance and for this specific occasion, for this specific plot. So I want to say we then learn that I think is this when we cut to two, like, a child protagonist, or do we first get the fact that he gets sent to prison?
Yeah, he gets. Well, first he go to that. First he goes to that show where that woman dances, doesn't he? Doesn't he go to that show where that woman dances? And that's where you get this idea that he has a problem with promiscuous women. He shows this woman, she's dancing on the stage, and you can see, this is when you get the first shot of his hands, where his hand says hate on it. And the other hand says love, but see the first hand that says hate. He puts it in his pocket, and then he, like, rips open the pocket when he's upset. And then I think from there is when we get our protagonists after that.
Yeah, the two little kids, John and Pearl, and they're two innocent children whose lives get shattered.
Yeah,
basically right away.
And not by Mitchum yet, but
not by him specifically, but in the very first scene we see them in, basically their father, portrayed by Peter Graves, who's in this, like, one or two scenes or three scenes of the movie. He's just robbed a bank, and he's got like $10,000 in cash. He's being pursued by the cops, and he needs a place to hide it. But we don't initially see where he hides it, because it cuts to the cops, like, arriving and then him being taken away and all that stuff. But he tells his children, promise me never to tell anyone where this money is. And the cops come, and they arrest him, they knock him aside. But in that moment, the older one, John, is kind of traumatized by what he's witnessing, by what he's seeing. I think Pearl is too young to really truly comprehend the trauma that's currently happening.
Yeah.
And I think that's a kind of a running thing throughout the film, is that she's too young to kind of process what's going on, while John is old enough to realize what's going on.
Yeah.
So his father gets taken away, and what we also learn is that Harry Powell gets arrested for a car he's stolen, and he's going to get put in prison. And just lo and behold, his cellmate is this guy.
Yeah.
Is the Peter Graves character, who I don't know why someone who's getting 30 days for stealing a car, and someone who's getting on trial for murder and is going to get got sentenced to to death for murder are in the same cell.
Yeah, it's a little convenient, but
it's happenstance.
But yeah,
Peter Graves is Ben Harper, so it's John Harper and Pearl Harper, and then we get Shelley Winter's character. We get introduced to Willa Harper, but yeah, so they're in the same cell together, and just Harry hears him talking in his sleep and just talking about the money and stuff like that. So he's trying to prod him into telling him where the money is, and he never does.
Yeah, he never does
figure it out.
He thinks that he's trying to get it out of him in his sleep, and so then he kind of punches him out. Punches out.
Yeah, he does.
And then he's like, "Nah, I heard you talking about Bible verses, and I thought I would chime in or something like that." But then he starts to convince him of he starts to slowly coax some information out of him enough to know where he needs to go. I guess find out where he's from.
Yeah, but like I said, he never tells him even.
Well, he never tells him where the money is, but he does tell him that the kids know.
Or he tells him
he knows that the kids know where the money is.
Yeah. Yes, he does. So when Harry gets out, where he's making a beeline is to here.
Yeah.
And it was to where his family is. And when he arrives is when we get probably the most well-known aspect of the movie, which I think became more famous in Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing. The whole story of, right hand, left hand, love and hate. But before he arrives, we see that the children aren't having the best of time.
Wow.
We see that they're being bullied by the other kids. Terrible kids in this movie, by the way. Just awful. Just bullying them, that their father, is gonna get executed or got executed, and they're just picking on them constantly.
Well, they come up with some song about hanging them.
Yeah, they do.
And then the sad thing is that the little girl Pearl starts singing it, and she doesn't even realize.
Yeah, on their way home, they go by where the mother's working at that
candy shop, I think, or general store,
cafe place. Yeah, and then she starts singing it, and then the boy's like, "Yeah, you probably shouldn't be singing that."
It's like you're not old enough to sing that. Yeah,
it shows she's kind of not really. She's too young.
She's not aware of anything. Really, she just does things. She's just influenced by people.
She's innocent. Yeah. She's really, really innocent. Yeah. And we don't get, before we get that kind of left hand, right hand thing, we get our real introduction to Harry is, I think, his shadow shows up when they're in bed late at night, and it's just the silhouette of him.
Yeah.
And it's really, really an amazing way to introduce just a terrible, shadowy, dark force into a movie. Is just show their shadow.
Yeah.
And in the way a shadow can tower over someone is really kind of an interesting, theme thing. You know what I mean? I remember the first time I ever saw that was when I saw the Orson Welles film The Stranger.
Yeah.
There's literally a scene where the wife character's lying in bed and Orson Welles' character's in the doorway, and the shadow just consumes her entirely, and it's that visual storytelling. It's amazing. Coincidentally, the same cinematographer who did this movie, I think, also shot Orson Welles' The Magnificent Ambersons. So that's kind of that Orson Welles connection. It all goes back to Orson Welles for me. Of course. So we see that when they're lying in bed together at night, and then that's when we get the next day, where where Harry starts ingratiating himself to the townsfolk,
Yeah.
just slipping in like a serpent, and just infiltrating.
And so the friends of the family who she works with
quotes.
start to kind of egg her, like, you know, try to say, look, you need a man. You can't take care of them 2 kids alone.
I know. I hate that. So that theme just.
And I was gonna say that's one of the
that.
main themes of the movie is how.
But it's one of the main themes of the movie. I hate it because I hate when people say that. But it's like also like, damn, how contemporary is that? This idea.
Oh yeah. But the thing is by the end of the movie, it shows you the opposite. It comes to a point where it's trying to let you know that's not the case.
You know, that leads back to what I was saying earlier about, you know, how much I hate this idea of traditionalism.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And this is saying it plain as day.
Yeah.
Where these people are basically peer pressuring the Shelley Winters character, saying, "Hey, when are you going to get married again? Hey, you know, the kids need a father. Blah, all that nonsense that like there's something wrong with, you know, single motherhood, or there's something wrong with a child who grows up without 2 parents, or any of that nonsense that we're told over generations." And it's really it really is kind of fascinating. This is 1955, and like I said, you know, if this movie's kicking back against the whole traditional society the way it is, you know, it's really saying that, hey, maybe it's not the best thing because you know, there's this evil lurking out there that can just, you know, penetrate your life if you're just trying to fit into these societal norms.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Sometimes those aren't the best things. And the whole story, and what really gets them is the story about left hand, right hand, is, you know, is another theme that I think that is very not only contemporary, but it's a constant theme throughout cinema, is the battle of good and evil. We see that constantly throughout so many movies, so many television series, and all that kind of stuff. And yet again, we see it right here, where there's somebody who's pointing that out, but he's also, you know, he's evil incarnate, in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
So there's another scene that happens after that where they're at a picnic, and it's kind of like a social gathering. I think this is what you were referring to when they were prodding the Shelley Winters character to, you know, go talk to him, go see what he's all about, go see if does he like children, all this kind of stuff, and she does do that, and he plays, in the way Harry plays it, he knows how to manipulate people very, very well. He knows how gullible these people are. He knows how gullible and desperate a lot of these people are, and he plays the religious angle because a lot of people just fall head over heels into religion without really considering, you know, the consequences. Yeah. Or considering like other variables that are, you know, outside of it. They just fall into that box, and he plays them, and they hit it off, and what ends up happening is that John knows this he's full of crap. Yeah. He knows that he doesn't quite trust him. He doesn't know why right away, but he doesn't quite trust him. And Pearl, but Harry knows that he can get to the mother through Pearl. So there's scenes where he's interacting with her that get him, that make him seem like, oh, he's a great father. Yeah. You know what I mean? He could be a great father because he's so caring with Pearl and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. You know, this scenario, you know, kind of reminds me of a newer film. It must have took a lot of influence. Is that recent film that went to Netflix, Devil All the Time?
Oh,
you know,
yes.
Where you have a lot of, you know, a movie about how religious, that traditionalism, you know, is kind of the whole wolf in sheep's clothing. You know, that they use that facade of purity as a way to do evil acts.
Well, he's kind of like a televangelist.
Yeah, basically.
You ever see these big time televangelists now with their multi-million-dollar churches?
Yeah.
And yet they still keep asking for money, even though they're like a multi-million-dollar like business machine. Yeah. And it's like come on. They've made movies about that too. I think of the movie was it Elmer Gantry? with Burt Lancaster, where he's like a traveling preacher, but he knows his act is BS,
Yeah.
and he's just doing it to dupe people. It came out in 1960, starring Burt Lancaster, and he got I think he won the Oscar for that film.
That's not one I've seen.
No, there's a Blu-ray for it, I think, available through Olive. It's Kino. I think Kino. I watched it recently because the Criterion Channel had like a whole collection of Burt Lancaster movies, and I was just marathoning Burt Lancaster movies, and it happened to be in there. It's from Kino. But before I get off on that track, but yeah, there's been a lot of movies about traveling preachers and duping people and all that kind of stuff, and it's taken right from real life.
Oh yeah,
right from real life onto the screen. So he's under this guise as a preacher, and he's riling up and getting involved with the people where he's having like I don't know if you would call it a church service or if you would call it a cult meeting, but it's like
some would say it's one and the same.
Yeah, some would say that, but just the way in which it's presented is he's standing up. He's standing up in front of everyone, and he's just like preaching and stuff like that. And also, I think this is where I don't know if they got married yet, or if this happens before they get married. But basically, Willa, portrayed by Shelley Winters, is just like confessing how terrible she is as a human being. How she is the reason why her husband robbed a bank and he's dead and went to prison and all that kind of stuff. And yet again, it's playing on the idea of misogyny and patriarchy and how toxic and how awful that is, and how it makes people believe they are the victims of other people's actions when they're not. Where it's really those people are the ones who did those things because they're the bad person, not because you're the one who drove them to do bad things. Yeah. It's kind of like gaslighting.
Basically, I was going to say,
Harry Potters kind of gaslighting her and gaslighting the people in the town to believing stuff that he wants them to believe.
Yeah.
But before then, before they get married, he tells John that they are getting married. Harry does, and John basically calls him out right away.
Yeah.
And that contention is there, like obviously throughout the whole movie, but in this early part, it's still there consistently. There's one scene where it's a transition where Pearl is cutting up the money into
Jeez.
And this I think is also after they get married. And I'll get to the marriage scene soon, because I thought that their marriage night scene is very fascinating as well. Messed up, but fascinating. And Pearl is cutting up the money into paper dolls, basically.
Yeah.
And John catches her, and they're trying to get all the money back into what now we know where the money is hidden inside the doll. And what is interesting is up to that point in the film, we didn't know where the money was. We know that the kids knew where it was, but we weren't quite sure where it was. Yeah. Harry himself told Willa that, he told me that he threw it in the river.
Yeah.
So that was been the lie that he's been going on to make his intentions seem like they're more pure, where in fact he's just in it for the money.
He knows that the father knew that the only person he could trust with the secret was somebody like his children, because when you're that innocent, something like a promise actually matters. To adults, money is more important than that promise. Like to a lot of adults at least. They're going to go after that money. They don't care because that guy's dead.
Oh, yeah.
That guy's dead now. Who cares? Who cares about that promise?
But the kids John has to keep reminding Pearl to keep that promise, because she's the weak link, and Harry knows she's the weak link.
Yeah.
Harry also knows that the mother is the weak link, but I think he knows that she doesn't know where that money is.
Yeah.
But I do want to backtrack, and I do want to talk about the wedding night scene, because they do get married, and then they have a wedding night scene, and this is where I think the gaslighting and projection of self-loathing really starts for the Shelley Winters character, because she's thinking it's going to be a traditional wedding night.
Oh yeah, going in, it's wedding night, and now it's time to what's the word I'm looking for?
Consummate the marriage.
Consummate the marriage. And so he's in the bed already, and she comes in with a nightgown. She looks kind of nice, and as soon as he sees her, he's like, what do you think I'm gonna do? You think you would come into this bed and lay with me, basically? She just kind of walks away, and it's he's like, he goes into this whole spiel about do you want to have more kids? And she's like, no, and he's like, well, then why do we need to have sex? Yeah, that should only be for having kids.
Which is in line directly with a lot of religious belief that that sex for pleasure is a sin, and that sex should only be for procreation. And there is, I think, this was years ago, because I studied a lot of religion, but I think it's either Catholicism or Christianity. I'm not an expert. It's been years since I've studied this, where when you get married in the church or something like that, you have to basically promise to be willing to have children.
Yeah.
Because I think the whole idea of marriage, or the core belief of marriage, is to procreate. The idea of two loving people coming together, using that love to create new life and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And the idea of sex for pleasure is completely thrown out the window. But in this scene, he's kind of berating her for even having that idea, and it leads, I think, to it just bleeds directly into his misogyny and his hate for women, like you mentioned earlier. And basically, this is where she starts hating herself and believing that she is she's a terrible person and all that kind of stuff. And it kind of continues right away to the point where she looks like she starts acting as if she's been magically enchanted, or she's in a trance, or something like that.
She
the way she starts talking and acting, and the way she starts kind of neglecting her kids and whatnot, not believing John when he says that that Harry keeps asking about the money and all that kind of stuff, and it's just kind of a breakdown of her character.
I was gonna say, in a way, she becomes just as bad as him. I mean, in a way, because not as bad, but she's now putting her kids in danger, and kind of
she's now believing the same delusions.
Well, she's believing illusions, but she also has a scene where she literally hears, him, questioning Pearl, and then kind of running after and attacking her, and does nothing about it.
Which is fascinating to me. Yeah, because there's a scene where John and Pearl are in their bedroom, and then what's his name comes in and starts talking to Pearl, and just excluding John right away. And I think it's actually the cover art for.
Yes, it is.
The Blu-ray. It's that's the scene it's the cover art for, and it's really disturbing the way in which he's trying to manipulate Pearl into telling him about where the money is. He doesn't tell her straight up, where's the money. He uses manipulative language we shouldn't be telling secrets. That's a sin. We shouldn't be doing this. Do you have any secrets? It's really creepy because, the way adults can manipulate children has always been very irksome to me.
He starts out by trying to be funny or be, he's like, he says I'll tell, he's like, tell me a secret. What's your name? And then she thinks that's funny. You know my name. It's Pearl. It's like, okay, well, I'll ask for a different secret. Where's the money? And then she'll try to say that John's bad. Her brother's bad. Whatever he says.
Yeah, he takes her out of the room and takes her downstairs, and and we don't see, but we hear the ADR, we hear the audio of when Shelley Winters is approaching the house, and we see, and this is when he breaks character essentially, and he basically says, "Tell me where the money is, or I'm gonna rip your arm off." And Shelley Winters hears that outside. She must have heard it, and she comes in and she's kind of dumbfounded by it. Like, she doesn't react.
She reacts by going inside, but then when she gets in there, she is too afraid to actually really protect. I mean, like, she goes after her daughter, but that's it. Right. Then after that, she's basically in shock.
She's in shock because I think, like, the veil has been torn down a bit about who Harry is, but the issue I have is letting this person in their life already and not being fully aware of who they are. And that's not only a movie making thing. That's something I think we see a lot.
Oh, it's a real
thing.
Well. Yeah, I think the movie, in a sense, kind of, in a sense, it would have been nice that if there was maybe a good 20 minutes more of this movie to really give you a little bit more lead up. Like, and the thing is I think that, if I'm not mistaken, they're going to be making a remake of this.
Yes,
and I think it was maybe a limited series, not a movie.
I think it wasn't for like FX or something.
Yeah, maybe. I think they're gonna.
I mean, they haven't even casted anybody. They haven't even announced when it's coming out. But I know it's in the works.
Yeah, so a limited series of this, I think, would do it justice.
Yes, because I think that would be kind of cool to see. Just because you can kind of really amp up
the suspense,
the manipulation, the suspense.
Like, make it like an 8-episode limited series.
I was thinking more like 6
to 8. Yeah.
Something like that would really amp up the suspense, build the characters, build the kids out a little bit more, really make the atmosphere even more suffocating and isolating than it already is in this movie.
Yeah,
that's the one thing I think becomes really apparent, is that these kids are isolated.
Yeah.
There is nobody who's there to help them.
Yeah.
They are on their own because the adults around them have failed. They're failures of human beings.
I mean,
they don't recognize the evil that should be apparent to them. The kids recognize it, but the adults don't.
I mean, they're so consumed with trying to survive. Everybody's trying to survive because it's the Great Depression. Their economy's in the toilet, and Mitchum's character is just the devil walking amongst them. That's doing whatever he has to continue to survive and keep being evil.
There's also kind of the old adage that children can recognize things that adults can't sometimes, and I think that's very apparent in this movie. So what ends up happening is that very night, Robert Mitchum's character, Harry, like we've said, he kills Shelley Winters' character, Willa. And
it's a very iconic shot.
It's a very iconic shot. He takes out his switchblade and he kills her while she's in the bed. We don't see it happen, but it happens. He cuts her throat.
And this shot, man, is they're like up in the bedroom, and this bedroom has like a vaulted, bless you, has a vaulted ceiling. It's very almost pointed, very pointed, and it's very, the shot is very set up, and it's very almost just,
it's very
ominous, and the ceilings are completely black, and it surrounds the bed.
Yet again, you have the shadows and all that kind of stuff, consuming.
It's a beautiful shot.
Space.
And then he kind of comes over top of her with the switchblade. She sees it coming. She doesn't move at all because I think she's
still shocked.
Well, she's in shock. She's I think at this point realized that she's fucked.
One could say that, yes. Yeah. But what happens is now Robert Mitchum wants to get he wants to get the money that he knows the children have, but he's probably going to kill those kids. Like, there's no doubt about it for me that once he gets his money, he's probably going to kill those kids too, because I don't think he has any sense of
no. He didn't care about them.
Any problem with murdering children or murdering anyone at all, because that's one of the things how the horrific aspects of this movie is basically Robert Mitchum's characters trying to murder these children the entire movie.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that's truly horrific. And he's trying to chase them. They're hiding in the basement. And then, but before that, he goes to those neighbor friend people. He goes back to that candy shop and tells them, oh, she ran off.
Yeah.
She ran off with somebody. She's been drinking and all that kind of stuff. So he's covering his own ass.
He's covering his ass and
creating an alibi. And
really what he's done is...
They fall right into it.
What he's done is he's dumped her in the lake with the car.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we'll get to that shot. I definitely want to talk about that. And we didn't talk about Uncle Bertie, who's been in a couple of scenes in this movie. Uncle Bertie's the old drunk guy hanging out down by the river, and John's kind of he's got like a friendship with him. They hang out and fish, and they talk about stuff sometimes in the movie. And basically, Uncle Bertie said, if there's any problem you ever have, just come see me.
Think about Home Alone, the movie Home Alone. He's like the neighbor next door that by the end of the movie, except he doesn't help. But he's the neighbor that hits the robbers with the shovel. Hits Joe Pesci with the shovel.
That's what you think is going to happen.
Yeah, but it's not what happens.
And not what happens.
It's more like The Shining, where the old man.
Oh man, yeah, where guy goes all the way. Yeah,
comes through the snow, gets there, and then he gets killed.
Yeah, I'm not going to spoil that, but I'll just say. Much different in the book, though. Much different in the book. So Uncle Bertie is a character who, like I said, lives down by the river, likes to drink a lot, likes to have his...
He just likes to fish.
Irish coffee, and fish and stuff, and then wave at, the boats going by.
What a life.
What a life. But he also, he's had a wife that passed away several years earlier. He keeps a picture of her, so he's kind of a lonely
He's a widow, too.
Drunk man. Yeah, he's a widow as well. So I don't know what I'll transition to that, but basically, Harry kind of, covered his own ass with this alibi, this story, and he's about to attack the kids who are hiding in the basement, and the neighbor lady shows up, and kind of distracts him for a little while, and the kids are all dirty and whatnot, and she's like, "Oh, would you like me to?" give them a bath or whatever. He's like, oh, no, not at all, anything like that. He's just trying to get her out of there. But what ends up happening, just to cut to the chase
this is where it really gets, intense.
This is when the movie transitions and kind of shifts to the second half of the movie. The kids escape.
Well, I mean, look, before that, this particular scene where he questions them is, I think, the most intense of the scenes when it comes to the... because remember, he sits him down at the kitchen table, and he questions him, and he actually really gets, full on, I'm going to slit your throat.
Yeah, doesn't he have the knife
out?
Yeah,
this is when he first kind of really pulls the knife out for the first time in front of them. And he's like, this is what I use on meddlers. He's like, John's a meddler, and this is what I use on meddlers. And then, Pearl tries to come over and touch it, and he's like, I don't want you can't touch that. He's like, I'll get really mad. And John tries to talk and it really upsets him, and he yells and slams his hands on the table a bunch of times, and it makes Pearl start crying, and so then he just tries to fake him out and says, okay, I'll tell you where the money is. So he tries.
Oh yeah, and then he leads him down to the basement because they say that it's under one of the tiles on the floor or something like that. And they get down there, and they're able, and they drop a shelf on him and whatnot, and they run away.
Yeah.
They incapacitate him for a little bit, and they run away, and they go down to see Uncle Bertie, and Uncle Bertie's passed out drunk. He can't really help him. And it just goes to show that even the good adults around
not reliable.
Can't help. You know what I mean? Can't do it. And it's just really they're on their own, and they get in the old rowboat, the old dinghy, and they head downriver or upriver or wherever they go. And then we just get kind of a montage sequence of them traveling down this river, and we see it's interesting how Lawton decided to just use a bunch of animal shots. Kind of random.
Yeah,
there's two bunnies.
Yeah,
and them in the background.
There's a frog, and it's like showing that they're now. I don't know if it's like maybe supposed to be symbolizing that, maybe that they're completely on their own, or like they're gonna. I don't know. It's. I don't know what the purpose of it is.
Nature and innocence and peace, I guess. Yeah, and just natural order of things. I'm not quite sure what that symbolized, but all we know is that they're traveling down this boat, and it's not easy for them because they didn't pack anything. They just kind of ran out.
They don't have no food, so they
don't have no food, so they stop at, like, some ladies handing out like potatoes. Yeah. And they get a couple of potatoes, and I know one time, like, they're traveling past a turtle, and John says, you can make soup out of that, but I don't know how. And
you also see Harry getting odd jobs on his way.
Yeah, he's like picking fruit and stuff. But what he's also doing, I found this to be endlessly fascinating. He's riling up all of, like, he's preaching his sermon and spreading his evil, misogynistic bullshit ways throughout, like, the countryside as he's traveling along. So we're just showing that, like, his evil is spreading. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like a disease. Like, it's just spreading through specifically other men, though, because that's who are doing the work, of, like, picking fruit and all that kind of stuff. So he's spreading the misogynistic, terrible ideology, if you will, to other people as he's traveling. Yeah. I thought that was interesting because we only see, like, one scene where he's doing it, but it was in there for a reason. Yeah. And I think that's the reason. And what happens with the kids, though, is they end up kind of landing because they both fall asleep, so they end up kind of landing on this embankment, and this woman finds them, and this woman is portrayed by Lillian Gish.
There's one there before we get to that. There's the one time where they stop and they see that house and they go stay up in the barn.
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
They stay.
Yes, I forgot about that.
And these shots right here are some of the most beautiful shots of the movie, where they're going downriver and you get, like, silhouettes of, like, I guess the sun's coming up, or maybe going down, and you see all this just heavy contrast of trees and the barn, and so they go and stay and they sleep in the barn, and at some point in the night you hear Harry, and he's picked up on their trail, I guess, and he's singing that song he sings a bunch throughout the movie.
Oh my goodness, this haunted me after I first saw this movie. The Leaning song, it's like leaning. You can sing it better than I can, but I'm
leaning on the arms of Jesus, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That basically that song that they pump into you on
Sunday school,
Sunday church services, where they just make you stand up there and say the same stuff.
But in this
and over
movie,
again.
it's kind of like the Michael Myers theme. Yeah, so that's the Michael Myers theme of him singing.
Yeah, but it's the Harry Powell theme.
Yeah.
And basically he's just this omnipresent, lurking predator in the night, constantly on their heels, and John sees him in the distance, and then he gets Pearl up right away, and they continue running away. And he's just you don't even see him, you just see his shadow on a horse.
Oh yeah, you just see his silhouette not in the distance.
His silhouette, and it's haunting beyond belief because it's just constantly preying on these children.
It is kind of like a slasher in a way that it's like you can run as fast as you can, but somehow they catch up to you at some point. Like there's
they're always there.
Yeah. And so they get back in the boat and start heading back down the river again.
And this is when they run into Lillian Gish. And this is when, so they start staying with Lillian Gish, his character, whose name I'm going to look up right now, so I don't just keep calling her Lillian Gish. And you have Rachel Cooper. And Lillian Gish is an actress who was really made famous during the silent era. Yeah. Because her credits go from the 1980s back to, like, 1912. Like, her credits go pretty deep. And she did a lot in the silent era that I'm aware of. And that's where I first heard about her name, and kind of like the golden age of Hollywood, and, the 30s, 40s, stuff like that. But of course, silent era being, 20s. But yeah, so she's in the film, and she plays kind of like this this woman who takes in orphans.
Yeah.
And she has a bunch of these children who kind of do all the chores on her farm there, and kind of help her sell goods and stuff that they make there. Whether it be butter or milk or stuff like that. And what we learn is that she's a tough woman, really tough, strong character, but she's also incredibly caring as well. And and she's kind of like almost like the perfect balance of that love and hate, or not even love and hate, but just firmness as well as lightness, and knowing the difference between the two. A perfect balance of what someone should be.
Yeah.
If you will, you know what I mean. She doesn't lean too much in one
She
direction.
reminds me of, if you've ever watched The Walking Dead, Carol from The Walking Dead.
Kind of, yes, but Carol could go super dark.
Yes, in the recent
she fought against.
She's gotten pretty dark
darkness
recently, but yeah, I mean,
yes,
but she was she obviously loves kids. She's taking care of a bunch of orphans, basically.
True, but she could also be like really like strict.
Oh, she could be very yeah.
Like I was saying, she could be strict. But what she represents the most in the film, she's kind of the polar opposite of the Harry Powell character.
Yeah.
I think where he is pure darkness, she's kind of on the other spectrum. Even though I just said that she's more balanced,
she's.
But I still think she's his foil. I think
the difference. I think this is an opportunity where it shows a woman that's completely confident in herself and her abilities.
Yes.
That's what I think her character is supposed to represent is where we've seen a lot of women who have been weak, or have been manipulated or been gaslighted. She is a woman that has lived a life and knows that her place and knows her importance, and isn't going to let somebody tell her otherwise.
Not only that, she's independent.
Yeah.
She's like you said, she's running her own farm. She's taking all these children, like you said, so she's motherly, she's businesslike, she's self-sufficient.
Yeah.
She doesn't need, a man in her life to, like, help her run things, as the townsfolk said in that other town.
Yeah, Harry's not going to be able to come
needed.
in there and sweet-talk his way.
No.
He tries.
He tries, though. It's a really great scene. We'll get to it, but what we learn is that, she's got a bunch of different kids in here, a bunch of different age ranges, and it's really an interesting aspect of the film. It also forms a kind of structure that the kids, I don't think, have really had in a while, or maybe have ever had, was that type of house structure. Yeah. Responsibilities and things like that. Because when we first saw them, they're kind of off playing by themselves. And when we see them again, after their father dies, they're off playing by themselves.
Yeah.
There's no real parental structure that we see, even with the Shelley Winters character. We don't see much of that in the movie.
Yeah.
But here we see an abundance of it with Lillian Gish's character, Rachel Cooper. So what happens is Robert Mitchum finds them. He does end up tracking them to that town. And he does end up tracking them to this house, to this family. And the way he does that is, yet again, manipulation and preying upon women, and preying upon, I think, in his mind, their weakness to be duped by him, by his charm, by his ability to tell them what they want to hear.
But the thing is he looks at it as that they're the ones that are the weak ones because of it's them giving in to their promiscuous nature. Is their sin. It's not him doing it. Him manipulating him is not the sin. It's them giving into that manipulation that's the sin.
Right.
So once again, putting the blame of his own actions on other people.
Yeah, obviously, but in his own mind,
he thinks he's doing that. He thinks he's doing.
He views them as. Well, he views them as inferior people. Yeah. So therefore he can manipulate them any way he wants in his own mind. That's what he believes, and the way he does that is he goes after
the kind of
like the teenage aged young woman who's living in the house, like the oldest of all the orphan children. And in the way in which it's presented to us is interesting because we think that she's meeting one of the other young boys in the town and whatnot. But in fact, she's meeting with Harry.
Well, yeah, didn't he just kind of show up and like he trails her to like an ice cream shop and then he's just like, hey, like, and then like says, can I buy you an ice cream? It's really. What's what I'm looking for? Messed up. Yeah, and the boys even recognize it to be kind of weird, and then
it's like no one like this clearly
inappropriate kind of
older gentleman is inappropriately, talking with this young girl. Yeah. Like it's really unsettling. And we know as viewers that he's doing it for manipulative, reasons. But lo and behold, she's kind of, her naivete gets the best of her, and she tells them, and he asks her, like, are there two, anything, they're two younger people at your place or whatnot, and basically she ends up saying, oh yeah, their name are John and Pearl, and then of course he knows that's who he's looking for, and he goes there, and basically he goes there pretending that he's their father, and that he's been looking for them this whole time. They ran away from home.
But the thing is John's already told her, Rachel, what actually happened, that his parents are dead. It's a scene that happened a little earlier that we missed, where she's out on the porch and he comes out and kind of just tells her, she asks him straight up, like, what's the story? And his parents are dead, and that, that's about all he can get, she can get out of him. So she knows that everything he's saying is a lie. Because she believes the kid's over this random preacher.
She does, which is fascinating to me, which is completely the opposite of the way the other adults have acted, where they don't believe the children at all.
Yeah.
Their own mother didn't believe them, and she believes them. And so he comes in trying to do the same talk that he's been doing with everyone else, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, and then he just kind of caves in, and he just just kind of runs after the kids. Of course, was a wrong move, because then Rachel comes and pulls out a 12 gauge or
she's got a shotgun.
Yeah. And
she pulls it on him. She's just like, she's not afraid. She's not afraid to
get dirty. To get froggy.
To get dirty. Yeah, she's gonna shoot this guy.
Get off my lawn.
She's gonna shoot him. I know, Gran Torino-esque. But yet again, he's probably never come up against a woman who's pulled a gun on him.
Yeah.
Or has fought back against him. Because he's always probably been in a position of power. Yeah. And it's that mindset and that misogynistic patriarchal mindset that he's probably always lived by, that he's always thought to be true, because he's never come up against anything else, and it probably throws him for a loop, because he does run away.
He says he's coming back.
Doesn't, but he does come back.
Yeah, he's like, I'll be back, when it's dark.
And he does come back. So basically, all the kids and Rachel kind of hunker down in the house, keeping a lookout, basically, because they know he's coming back, and he does come back. And yet again, the shadows kind of play about his menacing presence and all that kind of stuff as he's, trying to infiltrate the house and whatnot.
And he's also singing that song again.
Yeah, leaning, and he's singing it, and then she starts singing it against him, as if to combat his will of religion, because she's a religious person as well. Something that we didn't touch on in her talkings with the children and with John. Is that she knows the Bible, she knows Christian teachings, she knows, religion probably as well, if not better than Harry does. But the difference with her is she's not manipulating it to abuse other people. Yeah. She's
using it as life lessons. Ways to better yourself, taking the parts of the Bible and using it as guidelines.
She's using it honestly in the way in which I believe it should be used, in enriching and caring and enriching and, making people's lives better, not abusing them, not making them feel like crap, not making them, self-hate, not making them think that
they're going to go to hell if they do this.
Wrong.
Yeah.
They're going to go to hell if they, I don't know, whatever.
Listen to an AC/DC CD.
Yeah, listen to rock and roll music. You know what I mean? She's not manipulating it to attack people. And that's what religion has unfortunately become in a lot of circumstances. We see it all the time in politics. We see it all the time online and in people's lives and within people's families. People, people do all kinds of stuff, bad stuff in the name of religion. And this is not just now. They've been doing this stuff for centuries.
It was a lot worse back in the day when they used to just have wars over it.
There's wars over this stuff. There's still wars being that go on today because of religious reasons and whatnot. So this stuff has been around forever. But just for our purposes here, going back to this, when she starts singing back against him and she's matching him line for line in the song, but hers is virtuous and his is predatory, I found that to be really fascinating. Yeah. And they kind of match them up where he's in the distance and she's like sitting in the chair and, the window shows him in the back, her in the forefront, and it's really fascinating. But anywho, he comes into the house and I think she shoots him, doesn't she?
Yeah.
And he yelps and runs away
runs into the barn.
But the sound he makes and like the yahooing he makes of like this, someone who's never felt. He sounds like someone who's never felt pain before ever. He's never felt physical pain that at least that from what I can understand. And so he runs into the barn and then she calls the police and then the police show up and they apprehend him. But the movie's not over there.
Well, I was going to say, though, the importance in this scene, though, is where we get this kind of like, perfect circle of events. Now, when the cops come and apprehend Harry, and the way they do it, in John, the little boy's mind, it brings him back to when his father was arrested, which scarred him. Now, though he doesn't really, Mitchum's not, Mitchum's character's not nearly as much of a father figure. I mean, but it's still, his dad had done something bad and got himself arrested, and this guy here that was kind of like his father, same thing happens to him, and it kind of brings up like repressed memories, and it like puts him into like almost a panic mode. So that though the thing about that scene for me is I don't know that it's earned. I don't know how.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know how earned it feels because it's. I mean, then again, I can be completely wrong, but I just don't know that I can believe that you have a trigger in that particular scenario because I don't. How does he compare Harry to his dad? I mean, to me that connection only happens when you actually care about the person. He doesn't care about.
I just thought perhaps it could be less about being earned and more about being a triggering.
I get the trigger, but
something that would trigger those emotions.
But the thing is also, the emotion, the core of that emotion comes from the fact that he saw somebody he cares about get arrested like that and taken away. He doesn't care about him. He wants him to be taken away. Like he's bad unless you want to say that his actual father was actually bad to him, and that it makes him think of his father in the same way because his father was.
I almost feel like it's symbolic, or I think it's more symbolic of the loss of innocence or the trauma being not revisited, but like re-triggering, or like I don't know. It just feels like because John has been kind of like a stalwart throughout this whole ordeal for the most part. I mean, he's the one who's taking all the actions, protecting his sister and running away and all that kind of stuff, that he kind of breaks down in this moment.
And I get that, and I think I understand it. To me, I think it's one of them things where it's like when in film they want to deal with some kind of psychological issue, but they do it at a surface level. For instance, and this is something that a lot of people have made fun of, the Justice League, Batman versus Superman.
Oh, you're gonna bring. Oh, this is gonna get us down.
So the Martha thing.
Oh, you're gonna go down.
Yeah.
Okay.
So people have a problem with the Martha thing and how both of the trigger of Batman not killing Superman by saying Martha, and that they both have the same names of their mothers, stopped him from doing an action that doesn't really connect to the moment. And that's what I'm trying to say with this moment is that
I can understand your rationale behind it. I mean, I have a whole different.
We're not going to go down that spiel.
That's a much longer.
It is, but it's
road to go
somewhat
down,
similar.
But I understand the comparison.
Yeah, but it's somewhat similar. Emotionally,
yeah.
I think that's why I don't know that it's earned for me, because I think that emotion's connected to his loss of not only his loss of innocence, but his loss of his father. And this isn't his father. This is somebody that's been bad to him and evil to him. Why would he suddenly then break down emotionally when he gets the scene of this man who's been tormenting him for
And we also see that he takes the doll and starts
hitting him
with it.
Here, take the money.
And the money
take
starts
the money.
flying out.
So why does he suddenly now want to give up the doll? And give it
I felt like it was an emotional breakdown.
I guess I just need more of an explanation psychologically, because I don't understand it personally, the reaction. But that's maybe just something I'm misinformed with. I just felt like it just seemed a little off to me. But that's something that maybe I can maybe there's something in the special features that I need to.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of special features. That's something. I mean, that's not something we really get into here, just because. We just talk about the movie directly, but the Blu-ray edition from Criterion does have 2 discs, and the whole second disc is special features. But there's a 37-minute making of on disc 1 that is really, really good about the movie. But the movie also doesn't end there, because we get kind of like this epilogue scene, if you will, where John is on the witness stand. It's very brief. It's only a few minutes long. It's not like a whole court scene or anything like that, but he can't really. He also can't bring himself to testify.
Yeah.
At the trial, and they ask him can you identify this person and whatnot. You know what we didn't talk about, Steven? Is that the shot of Shelley Winters in the car underneath the water that I wanted to talk about, but I guess it kind of rolls in here because Harry is on trial for murder.
Yeah.
Specifically, the murder of the
because the uncle guy finds it fishing.
The old Uncle Bertie, who we were kind of crapping on for being kind of drunk and useless, did see the car. And Shelley Winters'
well, what's so funny about that too? I want to bring up is that for some reason that's the clearest fucking lake water I've ever seen.
Oh, it's clear as
fucking. You can see to the bottom of the damn lake.
Yeah, it's clearer than any water I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, somehow he gets rid of the car and the clean. It must have just been poured in there.
Also, he didn't do a good job of dumping the car because it wasn't that deep. If you could see it from the surface,
yeah.
Maybe the river itself is just not that deep, but it has to be deep because there were giant steamboats going.
Oh well, that and just a car. The car's not. The car's.
It's an old Model T.
It's a big car, so it's got to be deep enough.
It's all made out of metal. But it's an amazing shot that Charles Lawton decides to linger on, of her body underwater, and she's tied to the car, and it's both haunting, beautiful, horrific, and. Yeah, it's one of the most single beautiful shots of the movie for me, because it is all of those things wrapped into one, and the way she is lit, like we said, is she's illuminated underwater, as if there are lights underneath her, lighting up her whole body.
Yeah,
and that's how Uncle Bertie can see her, but they find her body, and I guess that's. What they arrest him on is that murder, and he does go down for it. And what we learn is that she did get her throat cut, and it's really, there was a whole scene where Bertie saw the body, and that's why he went and got so plastered drunk, and why he was so useless to helping the kids out, is because he had just, seen her in the water. Granted, Probably could have called the cops right away. Would have helped the situation.
Yeah, well, he starts to think that that it'll get pinned on him. You know.
And I think he was also kind of like probably already in. Someone who's an alcoholic like that is probably drunk constantly, or for most of the time. So he probably thought he was seeing things.
Maybe
he probably wasn't all there mentally, aware enough to call the cops right away. Perhaps it was, after sobering up the next day, he may have done that. For all we know, we didn't really see. But anywho, he does go down for it, and regardless of John testifying or not or whatever it was, and lo and behold, guess who's showing up, leading a lynch mob to get Harry as he's being transported to the police to I think he was getting transported to the prison or someplace. Is the people who were running that candy shop back in that other town. That lady and her husband, and I'm like, oh, glad you guys decided to show up now. You finally and they're like, oh yeah, we knew he was terrible all along. Like, no, you didn't. You were duped like the rest of them. and basically, they have like this whole lynch mob, and they're kind of like rioting and stuff and whatnot. But what was also weird to me is that. Even though this guy's a convicted felon and just a horrible murderer human being, the older orphan daughter, who was the one who was the key to him finding the other kids, was still like enamored by him to the point where she had to be dragged away by Rachel.
Yeah.
Did you catch that, or did I just read that improperly?
It's kind of like that whole like Ted Bundy kind of thing, where it's like.
Or it's like Stockholm syndrome?
Yeah, Stockholm-y
kind
of thing, yeah.
And she had to drag her away because it also shows like we see things now where like cult leaders, like how people even after the situation, some people can't disassociate themselves with the cult leader because they were so, invested, so mentally locked into all the bullshit that they were saying and all the whatever, that they can't disassociate themselves with it. You see that in a lot of documentaries and, stuff like that nowadays. But I'm just saying that just feels like it a lot. That's what it felt like. But we get another scene that really end the film on a positive note, and it's a Christmas.
This is a Christmas movie. Yeah,
it's a Christmas movie. It ends on Christmas. Yeah, so basically John and Pearl are they're still with Rachel and the other kids. So the other kids they get their presents and whatnot, and then John gets a watch that he was looking at earlier on in the movie, and that was his present from Rachel, and they have a nice like heartwarming ending to the movie.
And then she kind of does she kind of does like a break the fourth wall, kind of like talk to the camera that that there's good in the world, basically. Kind of. I don't remember what she exactly says, but
right.
But it's basically that light can defeat dark, kind of thing.
Good will always defeat evil.
Yeah,
that stuff that we've talked about before. But that is how the movie ends, and there's a lot to dive into in an hour and a half movie.
Yeah,
and it captivated me the first time I saw it. I think I've seen it. I haven't seen it as much as I probably think I have, but I think I've seen it about 3 or 4 times as well. Robert Mitchum is kind of the first Robert Mitchum role that I ever saw, and I've been a big fan of his ever since. And Shelley Winters, I think, is a great actress as well. Shelley Winters, for those of you who don't know, she was in lots of well-known films. She was in The Poseidon Adventures. She was in A Patch of Blue. She was in Lolita, which was directed by Stanley Kubrick, in a similar ill-fated role of manipulation as similar to The Night of the Hunter. I always kind of felt like she was playing similar roles in both that film and this film.
Yep.
And she won 2 Oscars as well. She won for Best Actress in Supporting Role in A Patch of Blue, and she won an Oscar for The Diary of Anne Frank, a film that came out in 1960. I think this is Yeah, this is the George Stevens film. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it is. And yeah, so that is The Night of the Hunter. One of my favorite movies. But before we go, Steven, do you have a pick for next time?
Yeah, I actually wasn't very prepared. I forgot to pick something, so I kind of, during the episode, was coming up with something.
Oh, you
I
pulled
pulled
a
a
me.
you, yeah.
Nice.
And so I figured out, we've kind of done, you could say, somewhat more subtle horror. And so I figured we should give them a hardcore horror movie. Something that's, not necessarily full on, like, like a heart, like what you would consider, but something that's like maybe very gory and very extreme compared to what we've been talking about. So I'm going to challenge us to watch the movie The Siberian Film. No, I'm just kidding.
Damn.
No.
I know where you were going,
but something that's pretty, I would say, pretty horrific in its own right. 2010's I Saw the Devil.
Oh my sweet goodness gracious!
This is a South Korean film, and it's basically about this agent who's getting a revenge on this serial killer that killed his wife, and it's epically gory.
Oh my goodness. I'm gonna have to gear up for this one. I don't mind gore, but this was a movie, man.
It's pretty rough.
After I watched it, I was like, I don't know if I can see this.
Well,
again.
too bad.
But I know it's too bad. It's not like it's. I mean, there are certain films I've seen that I'm like, I can never watch this again.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always got that list of movies that are just that traumatizing. And I Saw the Devil's not quite on it, but it's a movie that I always tell people, and if you want to see some gore, you want to like really. See a movie.
It's disturbing.
See that movie.
The violence is very,
movies.
very, shot in a way that's just very blunt, and just
very blunt.
You see everything.
Kind of in the vein of like Ichi the Killer, Audition. It feels like it's in that very much that category for me, the way I viewed it. I remember buying this movie on Blu-ray, and I had to show my ID when I bought it, and I've never had to ever show an ID to buy a movie. Like and I bought many movies from this same store and never had to show my ID. I was way over 18 at the time. I was in like my 20s or whatever. But still, they made me show the ID because it is, I think, is it NC-17?
I would assume it is. It's an unrated film for the States.
Yeah, let's see. I Saw the Devil. Yeah, it just says not rated. There you go. Yeah. Unrated.
Because it's probably a movie that didn't get probably much of a release in theaters in the States, but later on, once it got a release, it was probably started to get more popular. I think this is a pretty well known Korean film that most people have I think a lot of people have seen. It's gotten its way around.
We've talked about Korean cinema before briefly when we did Old Boy.
Yeah.
So it's in the vein of Old Boy.
Yeah, it's got some of that flavor. I would say it's a little bit more extreme. The violence is way more extreme.
Yeah, Old Boy is a horrific film, but for many other reasons other than graphically gory. Yeah. That's like a psychological horror. This is like a literal horror.
This is serial killer.
Like the way the movie, I just remember the way the movie opening was really traumatizing.
Yeah, it's traumatizing.
But yeah, we will go down.
We will go down that rabbit hole.
Down that road.
But if that's
that's going to be an interesting show for us pronouncing the names of the actors and characters.
Yeah, I'll work on that.
We will try our best.
Yeah, we will try our best. But you know us. You at least know me. But that'll be it for this episode. Where can we find you, Andrew?
You can find me on Twitter at Cabzilla06, as well as my YouTube channel, Cabzilla Productions.
And you can find me on Facebook, Stephen Billings. You can find me on Instagram at Cinema Discovery Project, or on Letterboxd at Cinema Discovery. You can find the audio for this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Podbean. Thank you for listening, and hey, keep on watching them movies.
I know I will.